Thank you for joining me today for what will be a weekly news briefing on items of interest in the particular day or week. Today I want to start off with two announcements before I open up for questions. The first announcement is that the Pfizer vaccine is authorized in Arkansas for those ages 12 through 15. It has been approved by the FDA for emergency use authorization, and while it is approved for use, there will still be further guidance provided by ACIP committee that meets tomorrow that Chairman Jose Romero chairs, and the CDC. But this is an important news announcement so that parents can make plans to vaccinate their 12 through 15-year-old in addition to those that are 18 or 16 and above, which has been previously approved. And so those 12 through 15, there's a vaccination call line, and many will wait until we get the CDC final guidance, but you can call and make the appointment anticipating that that guidance will be forthcoming, and there will be some that will be ready to give that very quickly. But this is important news for us as we try to reach the goal that we set of 50% of our population, 50% of our total population being vaccinated by July 30. Now, it's a little bit confusing because the federal goal is 70% of the adult population by July 4. So there's two different metrics there. If you look at how we're doing in comparison with the federal metric, we are right now at 47.2% of the total, of the adult population, and so we're moving for that even though we're a little bit behind where we'd like to be. Our vaccinations have increased over the last week, and we hope that they will continue to increase. And before I move on to the second announcement, let me just go to today's graphic on the cases. As you can see, we have 233 new cases. Our active cases have declined for 2 days in a row. Our hospitalizations have not changed, so still remain the same. And our doses giving out, as you can see, 9,000 over the last 24 hours. And so we're making steady progress. We're not having any dramatic increase in our cases, and our hospitalizations are steady. We just have to get the vaccinations out. And then that leads me to the second announcement today, which is today I'm signing an executive order setting up the American Rescue Plan Steering Committee. This steering committee, which I'm creating by executive order, will be composed of 14 individuals. Of those, 8 of them will be cabinet officials or their designees, and 6 of them will be 3 members of the House and 3 members of the Senate. Those include Senator Bill Sample, Senator Keith Ingram, Senator Ron Caldwell, Representative Ken Ferguson, Representative Jeff Wardlaw, Representative Fran Cavanaugh. Those have been designated by the respective leaders of their chamber. I asked Senate Pro Tem Hickey and the Speaker for 3 names for each of those committees. And this is an important executive legislative effort to manage appropriately the $1.9 trillion that the administration and Congress has approved for the American Rescue Plan. Of that, in terms of Arkansas, we will have approximately $5 billion coming to the state in various forms. This will include going to our education institutions, going to our cities and counties, going to DHS in form of rental assistance or other type of humanitarian assistance, and then the state itself will be getting $1.57 billion. Now let me pause there for a moment and talk about this unique moment in history of $1.57 billion. I read through the guidance of the Treasury that was issued yesterday, and the purposes are very broad. There's a lot of flexibility. It's allowed to be used for capital investments as well as investments in infrastructure with the health department to guard against and be prepared for a future pandemic. This is such a unique time that it is important that we proceed through this in a planned fashion, that we proceed through it in a coordinated way, in coordination with our county and city counterparts that are receiving separate funds, and that we coordinate with our different agencies and education that are receiving separate American Rescue Plan funds. And so coordination is a critical part of it. We have to be methodical about this and not rushed. In other words, it must be planned. And for those reasons, I've asked Larry Walther, my Secretary of Finance and Administration, to chair this committee and to lead this effort. We are going to receive in the short term 1/2 of the $1.5 billion. Some states will receive it all at once, but because our economy has recovered more quickly, they're sending us half. And then the other half will be sent down the road. I believe it's 2 years down the road that we will receive the other, or a year apart. And so it's being sent in 2 different installments, but we'll be getting half of that in the very near future. The fourth part of my mandate on how to look at this funding is that we have the community engaged in it. And so on my executive order, on the last page is a paragraph that I added, which says that we would utilize advisory committees or working groups as needed within the private sector to assist in the development of investment plans for the American Rescue Plan funds. And so those cabinet members, Stacy Hurst is here from Parks, Heritage, and Tourism. I want her to utilize advisory teams to the private sector to help guide and plan and make recommendations for the investment of these funds. The same thing for economic development side, or I've talked to Dr. Dillahay here from the Department of Health, that we engage our Department of Health partners to look at what kind of infrastructure investments. And so while we have our steering committee, we're going to be utilizing the private sector and nonprofit and our partners to help guide this investment. And when I said that this is a unique opportunity, it is unique because we do not want to necessarily spend this money when the federal money runs out. We don't have any state money to supplement it. And so to me, the priority should be capital investments like broadband. It needs to be investments that we can make that does not incur long-term spending and indebtedness of the state. And so not necessarily programmatic investments as much as capital investments is what I hope we can look for. Obviously, we're going to have some short-term humanitarian needs that will be a part of it as well. And so those are the 2 key announcements that I wanted to make today. I also wanted to add that our previous CARES Act steering committee that all of you followed will remain in existence, and I kept them separate. We'll have the CARES Act steering committee because they're separate CARES Act funds that are still being allocated and accumulated and accounted for. And then we'll have our separate American Rescue Plan steering group for the new funds that will come. 2 separate steering groups for 2 separate pots of money. Senator Bond served on that steering group of the CARES Act. He has retired from the Senate, and Senator Hickey has asked Senator Elliott to replace him in that service on the CARES Act steering committee. With that, I'll be happy to turn it open to any questions you might have.
I guess beyond broadband, do you have other specific areas that you want them to look at, or specific amounts that you're going to be proposing when it comes to broadband or other areas? And separately, I know that you talked before about the issue of any constraints this might have on tax cuts. Looking at the guidance and talking with the administration, does this put any constraints on what you've talked about in terms of income tax cuts in the fall?
Right, and the first part of the question first, in terms of ideas and early suggestions. One, I want to be careful because we have a process, we have a committee that's set up, we want to hear private sector engagement, legislatures involved, but there's broad consensus in supporting broadband investment in Arkansas, and that has to be coordinated because there's other broadband money flowing, but that's a high priority. Secondly, and I'll just limit myself to two ideas here. Secondly, with what we've seen with the Colonial Pipeline, we have to continue to invest in our cybersecurity protections in this state. Upgrade of our IT systems, upgrade of our cybersecurity efforts. And so those are two. In terms of the tax cuts, I'm going to probably be going with Secretary Walther to visit with the Biden administration on the issue of their guidance related to tax cuts. Gene Sperling, who I visited with, is the program director for the American Rescue Plan out of the Biden administration. I visited with him. I want to visit with him again specifically about what our plan would be for tax cuts in Arkansas, demonstrating that they have nothing to do with the American Rescue Plan money. Totally separate, depending upon our state revenues, and I want to hopefully get in advance some clearance so that we can proceed with both without risk.
If you don't get that clearance, would you still pursue the tax cuts?
I'm committed to pursuing the tax cuts. That's important for the long-term future of our state. I hope we can do it consistent with utilizing this money for other investments.
So the entire $1 billion is discretionary?
Discretionary within limits. Now, it has to be within the guidelines of the Department of Treasury. They're very broad guidelines, but you still have to spend the money within those guidelines. And they've, in talking to the administration, that if there's some question areas, we just want to get clearance in advance on those. But there's enough flexibility. For example, broadband is specifically mentioned, so that's okay. Capital investments in our health infrastructure is in advance approved. Other areas we might have to look at more carefully. Yes.
With all of the people in Arkansas who are maybe behind on their rent, have lost businesses during the pandemic, or depending on unemployment, do you think that this is enough to turn our economy around and help these folks that have been hit the worst financially?
A great question, and the answer is absolutely yes. Now, let's just look at the issue of rental assistance. We still have, I think it's like $17 million that has not been spent in rental assistance from the original CARES Act funds. That was from early days of the pandemic. And then you had the December stimulus package that came out that I believe is $170 million in rental assistance that has not yet been spent. We can still tap into that. And then you have the American Rescue Plan money that we have not yet received that will be another pot of money. Now, part of the challenge is that because there was such a large amount of money, we're having to have a third-party contractor to help us to appropriately deliver that rental assistance. And so there's been some delay early on, but as soon as that money starts flowing more quickly, then they'll be more than adequate to cover the needs of our state.
You decided whether to extend the public health emergency beyond this month?
I have till the 20th on that, so I've not reached a decision on that yet.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, any specific plans on how to get the shots to the 12 to 15-year-olds? Like, are you going to have clinics in schools or?
A good question. And first of all, we've, I believe it's well over 300 physician clinics that any parent can bring their son or daughter to their normal health clinic, and it should be available there, or they can call the toll-free number and get guidance on where it is, because it is the Pfizer vaccine that is available for that age group. Colonel, why don't you come up here and elaborate on how that will be made available?
Thank you, sir. And Andy, I appreciate the question, because truthfully, by the end of today, we will have vaccine in every county in the state, Pfizer vaccine in every county in the state. And by the end of the week, we should have it in about 375 different locales. So we're hoping to have that guidance from the ACIP by Thursday, and then allow us to be able to start, working those. So we have been talking with several different school districts, and I welcome any school district that is looking to do an on-site, event. I'll be more than happy to talk to them. We're also trying to reach out to the AAA to be able to find, those teams that are going to be having camps this summer to be able to be available to be able to get vaccine at that time as well. So everything's on the table. We want to make sure that every Arkansan has an opportunity to get a vaccine.
Alex, did you have another one?
Yes, Governor, you took part in a letter sent to the President and Vice President regarding the crisis at the southern border, urging them to change their strategy. How is the crisis spilling into Arkansas, as the letter suggests, and what do you see as the solution?
Well, first of all, I'm concerned, and every Arkansan is concerned about the border, because it's the pathway to our nation. Whenever you have undocumented immigrants that are coming in, it puts burdens on systems. It can do that here in Arkansas as well, as we've seen in the past. We're a compassionate nation, but we have to have a legal and a reasonable flow of immigrants coming to our country, and we don't see that at the border now. And so this administration has made mistakes in terms of changing policy, and the message has been sent, and we're paying the price for it right now on the border in a very humanitarian way, that it does become a humanitarian crisis.
Do you see Arkansas as housing more undocumented immigrants now than before?
Those are federal decisions. I expect that our refugee admission this year will be increased. We've been advised that we will be receiving additional refugees in Arkansas this year. The numbers are not dramatic, but they will be relocating more refugees here, and this is a federal decision, and we'll see how that develops further.
Do you think that opting out of the federal unemployment assistance is going to bring about the desired effect? Because there's kind of the dynamic that's out there now between, we have a need for employees, but a lot of people who may be looking for employment don't see the benefits and the wages where they think it ought to be.
I do. I believe that you will see an increased number of Arkansans that will be moving into the workforce because our employers are providing incentives and they are providing a good wage rate. But it's sort of hard to compete with the package that the Biden administration has made available, from not just unemployment, but extra pay to stay at home, along with all the other assistance packages are there. The key thing for everyone who wants to work, they need to understand that if they need help in finding a job, we can provide that assistance. If they need assistance in child care, we have more than enough money in child care to provide assistance.
Do you have an estimate on when we might see some of the additional refugees coming this way and where they might be housed?
We'll have to get back with you on that as to any specifics.
On the unemployment issue, Montana's governor had made the same decision, but also had offered kind of incentive for workers to go back to work. Had you looked at that, or are you looking at something like this here? I
looked at it. I don't believe the time is right for that. We might not get there at all. There's problems that go with that. You've got tens of thousands of Arkansans that have returned to the workforce because they wanted to work. And they didn't get any incentives to go back. They just saw that as their responsibility and their desire to work. And so there's a lot of fairness issues there and how far you cover it. Montana doesn't have the same population base that we do, so we'll continue to look at incentives, but right now, we believe that's the right step, just simply ending the additional compensation part.
What are the kind of metrics, or what are kind of the points that you're looking at to make the decision on whether or not to call for its end?
Cases, positivity rate, and whether there's going to be additional action that might be needed pursuant to the emergency. Are we going to be responding more in particular ways that needs executive action, or are we going to simply be managing it as we are now? I hope it's the latter. If that's the case, we can move out an emergency into simply managing the healthcare situation. All right.
Factor into it all?
Yes, vaccination is a relevant factor. As those move up, that decreases the emergency, but the emergency tells people we need to get vaccinated because there's something really serious going on out here. So we want to make sure that whether we have the technical emergency in place or not, that people understand that we're taking it seriously and continue to do so. We just need one or two more questions here, Jay.
Is the state itself, or through the American Rescue Plan, going to kind of help prop up the leisure and hospitality industries at all, to kind of maybe get through till the end of the opt-out?
Well, this is where you're talking about through the American Rescue Plan.
Yeah, or through the state, either or.
This is where coordination is critical because there's already loan plans in place and grant programs in place for some of the hospitality industry. But that's where Secretary Hurst will be looking at that, is there's gaps there, reporting that information to the committee and make decisions. But we hope that it will recover and that if there is assistance needed, we will look at that. All right, Larry, do you have a comment?
Just a couple of comments. I appreciate it. Thank you, Governor, and I thank you for your confidence in myself and the team at DFA to lead this effort in the American Rescue Plan. A couple of things that have been discussed here in the last few minutes. One is there is provisions in there for the type of industry you're talking about. Obviously, the devil's in the detail, and how it's going to be applied. We'll be working with Secretary Hurst. We'll be working with all of the secretaries in trying to develop a plan that meets our needs and meets the needs of the businesses and the citizens of the state of Arkansas in order to bring the money available to us through the federal government through this plan to do the best we can to maximize the use of it here in Arkansas. It's one thing that we haven't talked about, and that is this money is available to us over the next 3.5 years. It actually sunsets December the 31st of 2024. So we don't have to rush in right now like we did with the CARES money, if you'll recall. That was a very, very short period of time. So we have time to study it, to do it right, and I'll assure you that will be my objective, is to make sure that we do it right and it benefits the state of Arkansas and the citizens of Arkansas. Anybody have any questions for me?
I think Senator Hickey put some special language on dispersing officer appropriation.
Right.
Asking for you guys to develop a plan. Are you going to have to present a plan on how you're going to spend the whole thing, or how's that all going to work?
What I anticipate is, as we see where the money is being brought to, we'll determine the appropriation required, and we'll submit that to ALC for their approval. But I don't see any problem with that. This is a part of their tracking to determine where the money's coming from and where it's going to, and I think that'll work smoothly. Yes, sir.
Yeah, there will. Secretary Walther is exactly right. As the process, when we seek the appropriation, they do expect not a general appropriation, but a plan as to how that expenditure and that will be dispersed. And so we'll be working very closely with them and developing the plan. And I would expect they want to see a little bit of the big picture as to how this is going to be divided up versus trying to do it piecemeal. So please understand, I don't know if I said this, but the first meeting will be next Wednesday of this at 3:30 p.m. But I expect it to move slowly because there's a lot of money flowing. We want to coordinate it well, and we want to have a good plan for it. Thank you very much for your attention today.